Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon. We're happy to be here and happy to see some of you in the room with us as we're going to give you all the answers about how AR is going to scale in the very near future. So we're sorry for all those people who are not here. As we were introduced, my name is Adaora Udoji. I'm many things, and I work in the emerging tech universe. I've had a bunch of different seats at the table, including working in venture, and I'm also an angel investor. I do consulting, talking with lots of corporates and investors and entrepreneurs and startup founders about the development of these many new technologies and converging technologies. And I'm really thrilled to be joined here with Nathaniel, who is really extraordinary because he too has had many seats at the table. He's a mechanical engineer coming out of Carnegie Mellon. He's built AR and AR systems. He's also a venture capitalist. He's involved globally, both with Davos and having spent time in Europe. So he has a very broad filter for which we're going to talk about who needs to be in the room as we're developing some of this technology. And I'm going to start by asking you a macro question, and then we'll go into some more specifics. But Nathaniel, from where you sit as a venture capitalist, looking at companies and technology, where are we right now on the continuum? Let's suppose that augmented reality is a human being with an average life expectancy of 78 years old. How old do you think we are?
I'll answer that in a slightly different way. First of all, thank you for the really lovely introduction. I appreciate it. So I think kind of if you look at the life cycle of the technology, we are in pretty much the very bottom of the curve. We're waiting for something to happen. So I'd say we're right at the midlife crisis, if you will, of whatever this chapter is. I think the easiest way to think about that is when you walk through the convention hall, you see the exact same demos with commoditized hardware. It's pretty depressing. There's very little differentiation, and I think there needs to be some catalyst to get distribution, whether it's Apple or Magic Leap or something to happen. One of the guys that have a lot of money behind their distribution channels to come out, because right now the only major distribution is mobile, as you and I talked about a little bit. And that's not what's happening in there.
Okay, I wish you were here for more than 20 minutes because I am far more of an optimist. Things are not moving nearly as quickly as I think I would like, and I'm sure, like many of you sitting in the room, we're all living for the dream, right, of where this technology can take us. We know we're not there right now on the hardware or the software side. Having said that, okay, we're going to go with your assessment because this is a conversation about your perspective on this. Okay, it's depressing, but what needs to then happen? We know that technologists all over the world, right, all over the world, on every continent, maybe even Antarctica, are thinking about and experimenting, I call it the R&D phase, with what the application, right, of augmented reality might be, with drones or with robot or whatever combination of hardware and software. So what needs to happen and who needs to be in the room thinking about what to make?
So I think the best use case right now, which is kind of adjacent to that, is anywhere where you can get a step function increase in productivity as a byproduct of working with the technology. So
on the enterprise side, then?
On the enterprise side.
Okay, so give us an example.
Yeah. So, for example, like there was an announcement about 4 months ago that Aether, the augmented reality glasses company, they have signed a big partnership with Porsche, and they're going to put augmented reality glasses on their technicians on the line. So that use case is really interesting because what it enables you to do is you can have low-skilled technicians on the line with real-time instructions, and you can also decrease the time and cost of training somebody because you can effectively put the person who knows what's going on as like what would be equated to in customer service as like a level 3 problem solver in a command center and have them help the level 1 customer service person or the technician out in the field solve problems as things get escalated. And what's fascinating about that is that you can increase the productivity of a workforce by a significant percentage. So when we were just talking before we got on stage about the lack of people going into vocational training, et cetera, and we were talking about unions a little bit before also. Unions are actually one of the biggest adopters of these technologies, whether it be robotics or augmented reality, et cetera, which is actually extremely surprising because you think like, oh, we classically think of unions as kind of backwards, but what's interesting is that they're the ones that are embracing it the most because they haven't really taught their constituents anything new in the last like 40 years, and so they want to teach them all these new skills, and so that's the distribution channel right now for B2B, and it seems to be working quite well for a couple companies.
So basically, just to bring that down, is you have stakeholders who are engaged in seeing the development of some of this technology in real ways because they see it as materially optimizing for either their workforce or their workflow, right, or for their core business, which is good. And specifically, you've talked about examples of this. I mean, just to add to your example, also you see this in picking, right? In fulfillment centers across the country, there's lots of experiments, lots of beta testing around on day one, where you have high turnover jobs, low skilled, where on day one they are working. I mean, they are optimizing the business and delivering those packages, as opposed to the many weeks for some of these huge centers that it can take to get people up to speed about where things are.
Well, and then for companies that are having a hard time filling those roles, they're looking to solutions like AR to step function, increase the power for the workers. So you and I were talking about a company called Technologists out of Israel. It's not one of our investments, but because we don't really do that many investments overseas, but fascinating company. An arguably well hated industry is cable. The cable companies, Comcast, everyone loves them, but they work with a company called Technologists, and what Technologists does is they put the customer support in your phone, and you can do customer success through the phone with their customer success people drawing on your mobile AR app, which enables you to do your own customer service, so you don't really have to deal with their customer service. And
doesn't that sound great?
And
I see people shaking their head. You're like, yes.
And so as a byproduct of that, when you can put the power into the customer's hands using this technology, so that you don't have to go fill the roles that for workers that don't exist in the first place, that's an extremely powerful enabler. So when we're talking about what like the breakthrough is for like massive distribution, further looking, like that's going to come from either the Microsoft or the Apple or the Magic Leap or whatever it is when they get.
I'm not convinced that's the case, actually. I mean, let me ask you this. Generally, when we're doing some strategy or analysis, we look at data points that are behind us. And I'm not utterly convinced that when you look at data points of either the development or the scaling of technology that we've seen, say, the last 50 years, is going to inform us fully on what's coming to the future. And the reason, and I want to hear what your thought is on this, is there's too many converging technologies all at once right now, probably more so than in modern history. And when I say that, it's the AIs, it's the blockchains, it's the VR and drone, both hardware and software, just straight across. And there's all these variety of combinations, right, of which we're going to be applying them. That I don't know, does it have to be the killer app or the killer software? Can it be the application of it or the way it's used?
I'll pose it to you a different way. If you were to paint a picture, how does augmented reality touch 1 billion people?
I have no idea. Anybody have an answer to that?
So
I have no idea.
So the answer is, if you were to do it today, you have to use a smartphone.
Yes.
Which is mobile, and if they're using data, they're using AI. If they're using the camera, they're using AR. If they're using a public record database, they're using blockchain or whatever derivation of it. So all the buzzwords, they're just buzzwords, but the actual application is whatever the application is going to be. But the distribution channel for those technologies is enabled by the hardware today, and so if you wanted to touch 1 billion people right now using AR, you'd have to use mobile. And if you and I were talking before, we got on stage, if how do you take away mobile and so that you don't have to be staring at this device, right? Well, that requires one of the people who have raised billions of dollars to deploy hardware product to go do that. And I think that what you'll see within the next 2 years is a lot of the companies that aren't consumer brands get washed out or become commoditized. So if you look at a lot of the companies in there, you'll see that a lot of them end up being trapped by the software distribution players. So, for example, one that's really doing a good job, and unfortunately another, not one of our investments, but the CEO is a Carnegie Mellon guy, is Upskill.io. They serve as a distribution channel for the glasses providers. So the glasses providers love them if they're on their platform because they are the ones that are actually selling the solution to the manufacturers, right, that happen to use the glasses. But the provider can use whatever glasses they want, right? But they're ultimately using Upskill software. Upskill gets all the data, not the glasses provider. The glasses provider are, dime a dozen, and so they get competed out for margins when Upskill can really charge whatever they want. So the fact that a lot of the glasses providers will make a lot of things, it's like they're like the Dell computer. So I don't know if you've ever, I forget the book now, but I can send it to you guys afterwards if you're curious. But if you open an Apple laptop, the Apple is facing somebody else. If you open a Dell laptop, the Dell is actually upside down. And so all the guys in there are the Dells, and the Apples and the Magic Leaps that are going to be consumer-facing companies haven't come out with their product yet.
So then when you're looking at companies, what are you looking to fund? What do you consider fundable today? Because we're not going to reach 1 billion people today, right now. No doubt it will come in the future. But right now, what do you see as contributing to the ecosystem and the fundamental skeleton for which we will move forward?
Yeah, so I think that Texi is a great example of a company that would be kind of in range of something that we would be really excited about. Something that already has a workforce issue, already has a negative stigma, and something to go that people really need and really want.
When you say negative stigma, what do you mean?
We were talking about cable customer success.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So people,
right.
so people aren't going to that job, right? So they not only have a problem.
So a clear problem, a clear solve for a very clear problem that's universal in some way. In other words, you can go from Boston to LA, and a lot of consumers have a lot of problems with customer service in the cable industry.
Absolutely. And so, for example, like what's a really hard thing that won't ever get automated? Like all of these vocational skills, for example, like there was a big article, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, about the perks that plumbers are now getting. So plumbers at plumbing companies are now getting very, very similar perks to tech companies. Ping pong tables, wellness stuff, healthy organic foods, ping pong tables. Why? Because it's really, really hard to recruit a good plumber. And it'll never be automated because they're one-off things that are highly manual. And that's just that's a job that we need people to do. And so the easiest way to upskill a plumber is to either have them on the job working alongside an apprentice with a more senior person for like however many years to get up to skill, or they can have what I was talking about earlier and have like we'll call it a master plumber, I guess, for better or for worse, be at a command center, and for all the low-level problems that are the lowest, easiest to train people for, people can do those immediately. And as things get escalated and more valuable or more hard beyond somebody's pay grade, they can learn on the job by somebody more skilled than them. And it's really easy to do the math on how you scale that, because as you can effectively think about it as by the percentage of problems that are in, we'll call it these level 3 problems versus problems that are level 1, you can basically do the math on how distributed your workforce can be.
And how quickly you can get through it. So we've talked a lot about training. Then there's education, and then there's healthcare. I mean, one of the most interesting companies to me is one called Medavai, which is a New York City-based company, and it was co-founded by a brain surgeon and a phenomenal CTO. And essentially, they are creating AR for medical imagery, right? 3D assets that they can use in a variety of capacities. And I hear this a lot, which is the technologists teaming up with domain experts in identifying what would be most useful in a particular sector. And Osama, who is one of the co-founders, I mean, he literally operates every Monday morning. And he will say, and I've heard him say, that now he has 100% more information with this 3D image of someone's brain than he had before. And I don't know about you, but if someone's going to operate on my brain, I want them to have way more information as opposed to way less information, right? Or there's Nearpod, who does interactive educational content. And they have a phenomenal tech team, full stack, and they have teachers who have long experience in delivering education, curriculum, and so on to a variety of different skill sets. So it just seems that for all of these things, the training, the education, the medical, that this combination of technologists along with domain experts is really important.
So I'll give you another good example of healthcare. So there's a company called Arc'teryx, which is basically, they're embedded in every GE MRI right now, machine. And I forget what the exact stat is, but I think your eye can only process at the resolution is 200 images per whatever the length was, per time scale, per distance. So the MRI machines are putting out 2,000. And even the best cardiologists, when they were mapping hearts, really couldn't see the trajectory based on the granularity of the image that they were getting. And so what they were able to do through their mapping, which is effectively AR because they're mapping in real time using 3D geometry what the heart looks like based on the images that they're getting, right? It's kind of adjacent. They're able to track tumor growth rates more accurately because they can augment what the cardiologists are already seeing at a scale that they can't even see.
So is that some combination of AR and AI, or would it
Absolutely.
be a machine learning sort of
For sure.
application?
For sure. And so the thing about the buzzwords like AR, AI, they're all linked, right? It's
Yes,
not. They're
yes,
not.
yes.
Like a thing's just not AR, or a thing's just
Yes.
not AI. They're
Drives
all
me
the
crazy.
same.
AR is better than VR. You're like, it's all sort of the same ingredients a little bit.
It's. I think that harping on that company is just an AR company or that company is just an AI company is fallacious. I do think that there is a pretty significant
Can you
difference.
say that word again? I haven't heard that one out loud for a while.
Yeah. It's a good word, right? So the VR and AR, however, I think are totally distinct. The use cases for VR, I still haven't seen that good of one. We were talking about scaling issues. I would challenge all of you, if you guys want to learn about the scale issues from a venture capital perspective, which is basically how do you build a billion-dollar company, is how fast what these turnaround time is for a content producer in VR. And on average, you'll see a studio be able to do maybe 5 pieces a year. And if they're lucky, they're getting mid-6 figures for it. So that's about $2.5 million a year, let's say, in top line. That's not an investable category for us. And so because you still have, it's very early days for VR filmmaking. And so because you have people that are doing a piece here, a piece here, a piece here, like we were just talking to somebody right before we walked in here about all the projects they're working on. Even if she crushes all of those, she'll only make less than $3 million this year, which for an individual studio is amazing, but for a venture capitalist, that's not enough. So it's really hard to work in VR right now.
So then how do we get if we're in the R&D phase, which as I mentioned, I think of this as where we are. There's a lot of experimenting that needs to take place.
Yep.
And there's a lot of players that need to do their part, right? I mean, you guys are not going to fund the whole ecosystem of this. Corporates are not going to fund the whole ecosystem of this, and so on and so forth. But how do we make sure that everybody's engaging at a rate that makes sense? That's also, it's self-interested for them, but also for the greater good.
So I think that a lot of big corporate VCs like Qualcomm, Intel, et cetera, are putting money into the hardware providers so that they can get the scale to people to go build on top of them. So they're enabling the experiments for people because they see the value in their future chip sales, which is really what it comes back to. So if the infrastructure people believe that this is going to be a thing, they'll deploy capital behind it, and then people will come behind that. So you're seeing that now, but it's going to still take a while.
Okay, but don't you feel a little bit more optimistic than when we started because we're actually done now?
I
Because you
think
said
that-
some things that are encouraging.
Yeah, there for the B2B stuff right now, training, augmenting workforces, tons of opportunity. Consumer, I think that there needs to be a big splash. There's a lot of activity that's coming in the next 3 years, but I think that you're going to see a lot of consolidation in the industry along the way.
That sounds far more optimistic. Thank you very much, Nathaniel. It's been a great pleasure, as always.
Thanks, guys.
And
We'll be
thanks
hanging outside.
for listening.